This movie takes heavy inspiration from the original Halloween, asking the question of, what if you were a counselor setting up a camp and somebody decided to try to kill you and all your friends off? This is Friday the 13th. We begin the film at Camp Crystal Lake in 1958 as people sing about the thing I'll never know, love. We get a first-person camera angle of a person creeping around the house as we hear noises reminiscent of Nemo. After singing Hallelujah, two of the counselors give each other angel eyes before finding a place where they try to reach Bruno Mars's version of heaven. Trying to keep them locked out, our first-person perspective creeps up the steps and releases their souls from their body. Now you can actually get to heaven, but I don't believe you're headed that direction. Life really isn't looking up for those two. The way the guy responded to being caught, smiling and making a joke, makes it seem like they knew their killer. I guess we'll see. We fast forward to Friday, June 13th, present day, where we see a woman hauling a big bag where she stops to pet a dog and says she's going to Camp Crystal Lake. Making her way to a convenience store of sorts, she finds herself a ride close to there with someone headed that direction. Different times back then. As they walk to driver Dan's vehicle, they come in contact with a guy that seems a little bit crazy named Ralph. He gets his name right away, warning them away from the camp. He warns that the place is cursed with death, and I've watched enough of these movies to know who's right when I see them, but they dismiss his claims and go on their way. FitchHiker and driver Dan get to talking for a bit, where she says she'll be cooking for 50 kids and other staff members, before Double D starts sounding like Ralph telling her to quit the job before it even begins. He says Bossman left out some important parts, including the deaths we saw at the beginning, a drowning of a young boy a year prior, arson, bad water, all unexplained by the police. Looks like Ralph has a reason to be all fired up.
At least I'm not afraid of ghosts.
Lady, ghosts don't stab people. He doesn't count. Driver Dan drops her off at a cemetery and she heads on her way, as we get introduced to a trio in a truck: Ned Farias, Makeout Monroe, and Kevin Bacon.
You really think there'll be other gorgeous women at Camp Crystal Lake besides yourself?
Aw, dang, homie's in the friend zone with his friend's girl. That is never fun. We get a long scene of them laughing and having fun as they arrive at Camp Crystal Lake. They pull up to see Bossman chopping up wood before asking for their assistance. They help him topple over a tree stump and we meet a girl we'll call Wonderland. She says there's two other people, Buffalo and Brenda. Wonderland and Bossman do some repairs. B-Man compliments her drawings before getting a little bit creepy, not gonna lie. There's some hints that they've been a bit closer than boss and employee that I hope really doesn't get explored further. Wonderland runs down to ask Buffalo about paint, where she says she doesn't even know if she'll be able to handle staying here a week. You're going to wish you didn't, I'm pretty sure. As she runs back to tell Bossman they need more thinner, we see her from the perspective of a creeper in the woods, eyeing her down as she blows on by. Bossman tells the counselors to get as much done as possible because it's going to rain hard and he doesn't get behind. As he leaves our group of 6, they all joke about how dangerous the camp is made out to be. They might as well be saying Candyman in front of a mirror. We then see Brenda setting up the archery range, where she gets surprised by an arrow fired from Ned Farias himself. He may be getting out of the friend zone here. She takes it pretty well, and when he says,
"You know, you're beautiful when you're angry, sweetheart,"
she comes to understand his humor as well. I'm rooting for them. This could be either foreshadowing how one of them die, or how one of them try to survive. If Ned Farias doesn't get to use his skills with a bow, I'ma be pretty disappointed. We then cut to FitchHiker as she gets picked up by someone in a Jeep. We get that first person perspective yet again. Is this the creep? As they drive by the camp, the question gets answered. Jumping from the vehicle and kinda rolling like she should, she earns her name with her attempt to flee. Most wouldn't have even tried, you know? Annie tries to use the woods as cover, but her ankles get pretty jacked up, so she doesn't have the advantage of speed, ending with her and her throat both being cut off. Rest in peace. The counselors go for a swim as they are watched by a creep in the woods that almost gets caught by the group, but sadly gets away. Ned Farias pretends to be drowning just to get a kiss from Brenda, and it's a established she gets his humor, but homie's really pushing his luck. Keep it up and he'll be pushing up daisies too. Wonderland gets scared in her room by a snake, so everyone comes running in, causing the snake to be killed. I mean this literally too. In real life, the snake handler had to be held back by crew members and wasn't told that his pet would be killed on camera. Cold. Back to the film, the group are talking to a police officer who came out looking for Ralph. Nefarious makes too many jokes here before the officer leaves, foreshadowing either the appearance or the death of Ralph. Literal moments later, we get the answer as Ralph pops out of nowhere and again warns the group of their impending doom before riding off on his bicycle. What a man. Now it's time to finally eat. Since FitchHiker took her last ride, it's up to all of them to make up for her. I like that they mention her here. They never met her, so it's a nice touch that they talk like they wanted to. It's pretty sweet, honestly. The group then go to turn on a generator once they realize there isn't power, possibly setting up the loss of power again in the future. Kevin Bacon and Makeout Monroe live up to her name as Nefarious looks on. Even after meeting Brenda, he still can't lose feelings. Seeing a figure walk into a shack, he decides, screw it, let's follow him, walking us into the next scene. Here Kevin and Makeout hang out outside where there's going to be a storm that
can tear down that valley like a son of a gun.
Thank you, Kevin. I needed that explanation. The duo head inside the same cabin as Nefarious, where they end up doing the Devil's Tango. Nefarious died a simp we see without earning his name, off-screen by a simple throat slit. Homie really didn't get any character development, did he? As the other group, Buffalo, Brenda, and Wonderland all play Strip Monopoly. You know guys, regular Monopoly is fun too, just saying. I heard that if you try to be innocent, it improves your chances of survival. Once the tango concludes, Monroe leaves Kevin behind, where he gets killed by a stab through the bottom of the bed. This scene took hours and actually was close to not even working out due to the blood pump hose disconnecting. It was saved last minute by Stavrakis. I have no idea how to say that. The special makeup assistant blowing through the tube to cause the blood spray. He's a legend even if I can't say his name. Now that they porked Bacon pretty hard through the neck, the killer decides that Monroe needs to go, getting her attention as she turns the water on and washes off in the sink. She creeps towards the sound with no survival instinct to speak of and gets axed right out of the film. I coulda saw that coming. A door bangs open like Monroe and Kevin, interrupting Monopoly and causing Brenda to go back to her cabin, saying she may have left the windows open. I'd stay in and be a glass full kind of guy here and say I may not have, but to each their own. She arrives at the cabin using the same sink that Monroe did, so the water's automatically on, another nice touch to help with continuity. Brenda then heads out and we check back in with Bossman. He's at a diner telling the lady that works there that he needs to go check on the counselors before tipping and heading out. His Jeep won't start up though. Dad blamed queer mobiles, so he hitches a ride with a passing officer who agrees to drop him off at Crystal Lake. This officer just seems like a good dude. I hope he survives. Checking in with Brenda, she's doing some work before deciding to call it a night. After lighting candles and turning off lights, she goes ahead, lays down, and reads a book. She's being watched by a figure outside her window before hearing what sounds like cries for help. This is probably the creepiest part of the film so far. Unable to ignore possible cries for help, which does make sense since she's literally a counselor and she put herself out there to save Nefarious earlier, she goes out in search of the voice. She does earn her name here, Brenda, because this action is not only in line with her character, but a selfless one as well. As she walks through the night, she approaches the Archery area, where all the lights immediately turn on. She's blinded, disoriented, and yet keeps moving. This would make it harder for her to get hit by arrows, but a scream is all we know of her fate for now. Back with Buffalo in Wonderland, Buffalo says the generator is okay, and gets informed that Wonderland heard a scream and saw the lights. The two head out together and search for Brenda. They went as a pair, smarter than splitting up at least, but they didn't bring a weapon, which isn't as bright. Once they reach Brenda's cabin, they find an axe with blood, throwing it down and then heading to the next cabin. You left the axe? Why? Just why? Back at Brenda's cabin, they don't find anyone again, so head to the office to call for help. Since it's locked, Wonderland uses her head and gives me an excuse to give her name, Alice. by using a board to break the glass and let themselves in. The phone lines are cut, so the duo decide to take cover from the rain and wait for Bossman to arrive. The cop talks about how tonight is the full moon, and the fact that bad things seem to happen even more during that time. He gets called to an accident and lets Bossman out early, so he has to walk to the camp by himself. Not a bad excuse for keeping the cops from interfering, I suppose. Bossman gets to the camp and sees a person he recognizes, addressing them with familiarity, just as the two did at the beginning of the film, being stabbed by someone that he seems to know. Now our duo is completely on their own, so they decide to now split up, as Buffalo chalks everything up to the generator being out of gas. What an idiot. Going back to the generator he's been at 2 other times already like a predictable baboon.
The generator is losing power. Godzilla is approaching the generator! The generator is losing power!
He checks and sees that it still has gas, so something else must be the problem. Snapping back to reality, Alice wakes up, screaming out for Buffalo before saying,
Generator.
"Trust me, honey, I feel the same way." She then goes to brew herself something to drink, which with recording all this sounds pretty good right about now, before stupidly walking into the dark outside world all by herself. Woman's causing me to rethink my kindness earlier when I gave her her name. Approaching the generator, she swings open the door, and we see Buffalo brought down and mounted on the door. Nice kill, but you're really letting the meat go bad. The actor was temporarily blinded by this one due to surface burns, but he ultimately ended up being okay. What a trooper. Running back to the cabin, Alice actually does something fairly smart to keep the door shut in place by using a rope, before barricading it off, even though I'm pretty sure it swings the other way. She should have instead barricaded off the windows and the other door, instead of using every movable object in one singular area, but she's scared and panicky, so I guess I'll let it pass. Arming herself with a bat, she heads to the kitchen, where she finds another weapon and closes some blinds, leaving one open for the killer to throw Brenda's body through. How nice of her. Since the killer is fishing with bad bait though, Alice heads the opposite direction, seeing headlights headed her way. After throwing her weapons down because the killer who's outside won't harm her now that someone else has arrived, she runs out and meets a woman named Miss Voorhees, aka Pamela Voorhees, who claims to be an old friend of the Christies. Given how Bossman responded to seeing the person who killed him earlier though, that's not something that's very reassuring. The two walk back into the cabin, and Pam creepily talks about Brenda before screaming about the death of a boy named Jason who drowned. We learn that Jason was her son, and today was his birthday, as she goes from talking about her son to talking to him. Lady's nuttier than a fruitcake. She charges Alice, getting knocked off her feet, and chases her into the outside world, mimicking Jason, telling her to kill her and responding to him in kind. Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs this one. Alice makes it to a shooting range, grabbing a gun as Pam turns the generator on. Trying to get to the ammo, Alice gently taps the padlock and wonders why it won't open, causing her to get jumped, fight off her attacker, and flee yet again. Dude, just double tap her. She's killed your friends, you're an idiot. Alice runs to the closet that Ralph came out of and hides inside of it. Ah yes, get yourself cornered. Genius. She obviously gets caught, but Pam swings a machete with the speed and precision of a snail with a knife, causing her to get whacked by Alice with a pan. Alice then yet again walks away without finishing the job. Screw it, I hope she dies. Like gosh, you imbecile, tie her up at the very least, my word. Alice then goes and sits in a boat. Just sits there and watches the water, seeing Pam's reflection creeping up behind her. If this was intentional to fight her again on the sand, then you're an even greater idiot for not just finishing her off. After rolling around in the sand like a couple of counselors, Alice grabs the machete, and as Eminem said, if you're not gonna give her head, then she's gonna have to take it. Again, kinda like counselors would after rolling around in the sand. The movie ends with Alice on a boat, getting jumped by Jason and dragged underwater, pulling us into the scene of her waking up into a hospital. Turns out she was actually pulled into that lake. It wasn't in the original script, and although it's a decent scare and it is memorable, it's pretty goofy too. Perfect way to tie the whole movie together. I'm not a big fan of slashers, but I like this one. It's not unnecessarily vulgar. It does set up tropes that we see today, and the characters were mostly likable. Plus, the twist of Jason's mom being the killer was pretty solid, I have to say. Sorry I rushed this a little bit, I just didn't want to miss the date, and I've been working on my Castlevania video, which has taken up almost all my time. For more news, reviews, and whatever we choose, stay tuned to Nerdsfeed. Have a great day. Thank you.